Hey Trophies, welcome to my very first ebook series podcast. It's Trophy Sally. Hi, how are you? I just wanted to sit down and talk casually today with you about the topic of what I eat, how I eat, and why I eat what I eat, so that I can kick off this ebook series and dive into this nutrition topic, because I know it's very important and I know that a lot of you are looking for advice on what to eat and how to eat it so that you can get into your desired body composition, which we all may have a different desired body composition. Some of us may want to look similar to Stephanie and my aesthetics. Maybe you want to have more muscle, maybe you want to have less muscle, but we all want to, I'm thinking, be healthy and be strong and be light and be fit. And so I want to just give you a little bit of my backstory on how I have come to where I am today with what I eat and how I eat and why I eat the way I eat. And then also just talk a little bit about putting some strategy into how you can eat and how I'm eating so that I stay in this excellent shape, and the strategy that I put into my diet to get to where I am today, because there really is this balance that we have to find in our lives in order to be physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy and happy. And so there isn't a one size fits all formula. We really do need to find what works for us individually. And I think it does start with having a very healthy, calm, emotional state. And so I want to start by saying that if you really are looking to be your healthiest, happiest self, your very first step, which is what I've been really working on lately as well, is to check in with your mental health by writing down your thoughts in the morning, or just checking in on what may be causing a little bit of anxiety or depression in your life on a day-to-day basis, to see if it may be just a little belief you're having in the moment that really isn't something that you should be dwelling on, or if there's something that you're in denial about and you're not acknowledging, and as soon as you acknowledge it, then you could set yourself free. When we have our mental health in check, then we really do have a much more promising possibility of health for ourselves, for now and for our future. And so that needs to be of our highest priority. And then we also need to have that foundational health of hydration and of movement, and then balance in our diet. And so let's go ahead and get into the discussion of what I eat and how I eat and why I eat the way I eat, because I know that a lot of you are interested in that. And so let me give you a little backstory. I grew up with a mom that worked at the Space Needle restaurant in Seattle, and she was gone most nights of the week. And my dad also moved out when I was 5, and so I didn't have a dad influence for my childhood other than going and visiting him on the weekends. But point being, when my mom would shop at Costco and buy a lot of packaged and processed foods, and I would cook for myself with my twin sister. And so I didn't get into a routine of prepping meat. It was just a lot of packaged foods that ended up just being easy things to make. Lots of burritos and noodles and things like that, boxed dinner foods. And so I wasn't a very heavy meat eater growing up. I also, my blood type is B positive, so I don't know if that has something to do with me not having a lot of cravings for meat. But long story short, I look back and I just see myself as being a heavy processed food eater, but I wasn't eating a ton of meat growing up. So now, at this stage in my life, I don't consume much meat at all, and I don't know if that had to do with the way I grew up or my blood type. But I do now just focus on mainly eating a starch-based diet. The reason why I eat a starch-based diet is because in 2011, I discovered that the body runs primarily on glucose, and carbohydrates break down into glucose. And so I started eating a high carbohydrate diet. And at that time, I was influenced to focus mainly on fruit. Well, that evolved, and I eventually incorporated more cooked starches into my life as my main carbohydrate source. And that was when I found my best health. And so I have been eating starches ever since. Over the years, though, I have had to sort through all of my beliefs about all of the different starches, because we've got our refined starches and we've got our whole grain starches, and I was possibly trying to overload on the whole grain starches, and I wasn't necessarily as satisfied as I could have been. And so I was feeling guilty adding in refined starches, but I eventually came to a conclusion that I was kind of feeling like stuffed up on eating too many complex grains like whole grains and whole foods. And so I said, well, maybe I'm consuming too much fiber. So if I actually increase the refined carbohydrates, I would feel better because I wouldn't have too much fiber in my stomach. And as soon as I did, as soon as I found a healthy balance with refined and whole starches, I really did start to thrive. And so I kept going with it. And then I had to figure out over the years as well, okay, well, I've got my carbohydrates in check. I've got my fuel in check for my body, for every cell in my entire body, but where does fat and protein come in? A lot of my beliefs about fat and protein came from influences in my life since 2011, all the way up until now. And I really have come to conclude that a little bit of fat and protein in my life really does feel like a balanced nutritional profile. But I have explored having very minimal fats and proteins because I knew that every cell in my body ran on carbohydrates. So what's the point of having fats and proteins when my cells run on carbs? And so I've done that, I tried that, and I noticed that I wasn't as hormonally healthy as I could have been. And so as soon as I allowed there to be a little bit of fat and protein in my diet, I noticed that my hormones came into better balance. And so that is where I stand now, where I eat predominantly starch-based, and I have a little bit of fat and protein in my diet. Now, am I in perfect health? I can't say that I am, because in order for me to claim that, I would have to take all the tests and I would have to be able to prove that I'm in some kind of health that is better than everyone else or anyone else, but I can't prove that. But I do know that my mood is stable, my sleep is good, I run my business with my twin sister without any energy issues. I have great energy all day long. My skin is clear head to toe. Every month when I'm around my cycle, I do have a little bit of breakout, but I think that's completely normal. But I don't have any bumps on my body anywhere. I never get any ingrown fingernails or toenails or sore areas. I rarely get even an ingrown hair anywhere in my body. I mean, maybe occasionally in my armpit, but the point is that I feel like my skin breathes, my organs are healthy, and my digestion is healthy. I have very healthy bowel movements, like beautiful, healthy bowel movements, and my hair and my nails are healthy, and my teeth are healthy. My eyesight is excellent. I rarely, if ever, get sick, so my immune system is strong, and my skin isn't dry. I don't have dryness on the bottoms of my feet, and so my health is excellent. My urine, I keep it nice and light, not too light. I'm not trying to overconsume water, which can dilute nutrients in the body, so I just make sure that I stay on top of my hydration. And so I have good, healthy peas, and so everything is good. So that is all in check, which tells me that what I'm doing is working for me. I also have incredible body composition. I am a very low body fat and I have a lot of muscle on my body, so I feel good in my muscle head to toe. I jump instead every day, which has been a huge part of my health and fitness journey. I mean, of course, my fitness journey, but I want to say that jumping has also supported my digestion in my diet through the years, because jumping is very good for digestion and assimilation and elimination, and keeps the circulation in the body so strong and helps with movement internally as well as externally. We're moving, and digestive strength also has been profound for me because of jumping instead. So I'm very healthy and I'm very happy, and so what I'm doing seems to be working for me. But I know that there is a lot of confusion out there about what we should be eating and how much protein we should be consuming, and whether we should be choosing carbohydrates as our main fuel source or fats as our main fuel source, because of a ketogenic diet being very popular in this day and age. So I know that I can share with you that I eat a predominantly carbohydrate-based diet, and then I have a little bit of fat and protein in my life. But I do want to say that because of the day and age that we live in today, there is the ketogenic diet, and it is a diet that works for a lot of humans on this planet. And so I'm in support of it because I know that people thrive on it. And I want to say that it can work in the exact opposite of the carbohydrate diet, in that if we eat a very high fat diet, which is our primary fuel source, when we're in ketosis, then we just need to keep our carbohydrates and proteins low, and we will thrive on a high fat diet. At least that's what seems to make the most sense, because I'm thriving on a high carb, low fat, low protein diet, and the opposite would work as well. So maybe your question is, okay, well, how many fats and proteins should I be consuming on a high carb diet, and how many carbs and protein should I be eating on a high fat diet? What I've concluded over the years is that we need to have these other two macronutrients in portions that support our beliefs as well as our palate needs, our flavor needs. Because if we're consuming a high carbohydrate diet and we add in a little bit of fat and protein, and that makes us stay consistent on our high carbohydrate diet, then we will succeed. And we will notice over the years that the quantities of our fats and proteins will fluctuate and will change, because our bodies are going to be changing as we continue to go week, month, year after year on a high carbohydrate diet. And it will be exactly the same on a high fat diet. We may need to supplement with carbohydrates and proteins to meet our fat needs, to make our fats sustainable and delicious. And then over the years, as our bodies start to adapt and thrive on the high fat diet, our carbohydrate and protein needs may shift and change. We don't know for sure how much protein we need, but we do know that we need protein, and we know that excess protein, it can be taxing on our kidneys. And so we need to just check in with our beliefs about protein. What are we believing about protein? Are we believing that protein is fueling our workouts? Are we believing that we need protein or else we're going to lose muscle? And so those beliefs can completely drive how you need to approach your diet. Because if you are a believer that you need to have X amount of protein in order to stay alive and be healthy and meet your muscle needs and meet your health needs, then that's exactly what you need to do. You need to have the X amount of protein. I can't tell you to change your beliefs, because your beliefs are going to take over no matter what. And maybe though, if you research about protein and you learn about the protein needs of the body and what protein does in the body, it's possible that your beliefs might shift, and then maybe you can see how protein is supporting you in your goals, in your health goals, and in your body composition goals. Because for me, I've been eating a predominantly starch-based diet now for many years, and I have built incredible muscle in my body. And like I said, I'm very hormonally healthy. And I have never even considered there being a deficit in my protein needs, and yet I have had very minimal and actually no animal proteins or protein powders. And even tofu hasn't been eliminated from my diet just because I have no desire for it. So my protein is coming from my carbohydrates, my starches, as well as beans so many times throughout the week. And I seem to be thriving. And so I know that it can be done. And I know that for me, increasing my protein intake would be only if I started to believe that I needed more protein because I was showing signs that I was losing muscle or that I wasn't meeting my needs in some way, whether that be from blood tests coming back or something. So I just do what works for me in the moment, what keeps me thriving every day, and what keeps me energized every day. And then I let it continue to evolve. But I've noticed that eating high starch based meal after meal is having me feeling absolutely sensational. So what do I eat on a daily basis? I start with a cereal bar for breakfast. I have a Nutri-Grain bar. We also like the Trader Joe's cereal bars. And I have a cup of coffee, actually 2 cups of coffee. So each cup being 8 ounces. So I have 16 ounces of coffee in the morning. I also take breaks from coffee and I sometimes have cocoa. And then I usually get my workout in. My twin sister and I lead live classes on I Jump instead. And then after that, I'll have cereal. I love frosted mini wheats. Right now I have wheat bran flakes. I love honey bunches of oats. I love honey nut Cheerios. I love all sorts of cereals. And typically my cereals are whole grain and sugar based. And since that is a balance of carbohydrates being both whole and refined, I find it to be very good for my digestion. And so that's a very typical post-workout meal. I also enjoy bread. So I'll get any kind of fresh baked bread from the store. Sometimes I just get Easy World Dave's Killer bread. Again, Dave's Killer, the main ingredients are whole grains and sugar. And then sometimes I like fresh loaves of bread. The recent bread I bought was like cranberry pecan, whole grain bread. We've also liked just like a whole grain fresh loaf. Sometimes I get white bread, but sometimes just having a big chunk of white bread, it doesn't have any whole grain in it. So I typically like to have a balance of, like I said, cereal with whole grain and sugar, or a bread that has some whole grains in it, because I just feel better in my stomach when I have a mix. I also feel like my bowel movements are better and bulkier when I do have some whole grain in my meals. But I'm not too obsessed with it because I have to go with the flow. Sometimes I don't have any whole grain in my meal and it's fine. If I'm in an airport or I'm at a friend's house or a family member's house and I have a meal that doesn't have whole grain in it, it's no problem. But at home, I typically have some kind of blend of whole grain sugar or refined flour and whole grain flour. So cereal, bread, basic post-workout meal. And then for lunch and dinner, I have a whole array of meals that I rotate through or combine. And that just consists of any whole grains and beans. Sometimes I don't have beans every day, maybe a few times a week, and then potatoes of all varieties. When I say grains, that includes pasta, that includes noodles, that includes bread, that includes rice, that includes oats, that includes quinoa, it includes wild rice, includes tortillas, corn tortillas, white tortillas, so flour mixed and grains of all kinds, and then potatoes of all varieties. And I also like to have squash and root vegetables. And that is what I eat for lunch and dinner, of whatever I'm craving in whatever quantities that feel good for me. And we were talking before about having a balance of whole and refined. Well, when it comes to potatoes, I could eat a whole meal of mashed potatoes and gravy and just have that be my meal. Sometimes I'll have a whole meal of pressure cooked, then air fried white russet potatoes, and I dunk them in barbecue sauce. That's a very common meal for me. And so I'm not mixing whole and refined in those instances when potatoes are just already like a whole food. But white potato isn't like a sweet potato. It doesn't have as much fiber as the sweet potato, but I will have all potatoes, all varieties, with no thought in my mind about the mixing of the whole grain and the refined. And then when I have like ramen, for example, or noodles or pasta noodles, when it's ramen noodles, that's refined. But when I have spaghetti or pasta, I do like to mix whole and white together. It just lightens it up. But sometimes I'll have all whole or all white. So again, not being over obsessed with it, but just trying to have a balance of it all so that my bowel movements stay full. Because if I eat too much refined, which I have done before, I just noticed that my bowel movements are not as satisfying. So anyway, with that, that's my diet. Now, when it comes to fat and when it comes to protein, because I don't have any added protein powders and I don't have meat and fish or, beef, chicken, pork, fish on the regular, but occasionally when I go out to eat, I'll have some fish. Rarely will I have beef or chicken, but who knows? Maybe I'll have it in my life at some point if I'm feeling, craving it or just feeling like incorporating it into a meal. Fish is usually what I have when I go out to eat. Occasionally I like to have sushi with some fish in it. Occasionally yesterday we went to a sushi restaurant, Japanese restaurant, and I had a fish meal. So I do get a little bit of fish in my diet, but it's just when I go out to eat and I just let it flow into my life. But otherwise, I don't have the excess protein like I told you about. And then when it comes to fats, the only fat sources that we really do have are, nuts and seeds and oils, and then we have olives and avocados, and then we have animal fats. And so because I'm not consuming the animal products, I don't have those, but I do occasionally like to have avocados and olives, and occasionally have nuts and seeds and nut butters, but I just have it minimally because they don't often complement my starch meals. Like rice, what usually complements rice is like teriyaki sauce and sweet chili sauce, and then what complements my potatoes is barbecue sauce. And then when I have sweet potatoes, I often just have them as they are because they are just so dang tasty. And then when it comes to cereal, I complement that with plant milk, and the plant milk does have fat in it, so I have it, oat milk, soy milk, almond milk, whatever I'm craving. And then when it comes to bread, that's the one thing that is complemented well with an oil. So for example, like a plant butter is what I like to have on my bread. So I do have that. My favorite is Country Crock. I've tried lots of different plant butters. Right now we have Earth Balance, which is actually higher in fat than the Country Crock. For some reason, the Country Crock, I just like it better. So yeah, I have that in my diet as well. And anytime I have bread, I'll just put a light spread of Country Crock on it, no problem. And so I do like that. And then I actually do like avocado. I don't often have avocado, but I'm trying to incorporate it more just because I know it's really healthy and it probably is a better option for me than the Country Crock. So yeah, I'm just trying to have it all in balance. So that covers my fats and proteins. And then when it comes to fruits and vegetables, I like to have fruit seasonally because fruit is otherwise not in season, not ripe, and not delicious if it's not in season. And so seasonally, if I'm at the grocery store and I see fruit that's popping because it's growing in abundance at that time of year, I will pick some up and I will have it in my kitchen and I will eat it as I desire it. Doesn't matter what time of day. It doesn't matter if it's before a meal, with a meal, or after a meal. I just have it as I desire it. I don't have any belief about needing more or less. I just have it as I need it. I used to believe that I needed a lot more fruit, but now I just have it in normal quantities as I crave it, and it serves me very well. And in the summertime, it increases because it is way more in season. There's way more abundance of it, so I have more of it. And then when it comes to vegetables, it's also seasonal with vegetables, especially when it comes to squash and pumpkin and stuff like that that grows more in the fall. So I'll have more of those in the fall, winter time. But then when it comes to like non-starchy vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower and then lettuces and things like that, I don't have too much of them, to be honest, just because I noticed that I have so many potatoes that if I had too many vegetables, my stomach would fill up with all of these very low calorie density, bulky foods that actually have prevented me from meeting my fuel needs in the past. So I keep my vegetables to a minimum, but more importantly, I just eat them as I crave them. And like I said, since I eat a lot of potatoes, I don't crave a lot of other vegetables, but occasionally, iceberg lettuce, crispy fresh lettuce is such a nice complement to a meal because it does have this, it has natural minerals and sodium in the lettuce. I'm not sure how much sodium, but just minerals in the lettuce. And then it adds water and crunch. And so it's nice to have, and it's absolutely delicious. So I'll have that. And then we also occasionally love to have broccoli with our rice and teriyaki sauce, or broccoli with our rice and sweet chili sauce. And I say our because Stephanie and I are eating together and we love that compliment. Of course, cauliflower is good. I've made panko crusted cauliflower where I just dip cauliflower in like a flour cornstarch batter. It's 2 parts flour, 1 part cornstarch, and then just enough water to get it so it's saucy. And then I also add seasonings in there, and then I just dunk big chunks of cauliflower in that, and then I dunk it in panko breadcrumbs. I lay them on a baking sheet with parchment paper, and I bake them at 400 or 425 for 30 to 45 minutes, and they get crispy and crunchy, and we'll dunk those in barbecue sauce. So delicious. And then other vegetables, I don't spend a lot of time shopping for vegetables other than those main ones like lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower, just because occasionally in rotation, everything will come into rotation, but I just keep it simple. I keep it easy, and notice that because I'm eating so many starches, breads and cereals, whole grains and potatoes, I'm meeting my fuel needs and I'm feeling amazing again. And so that is my main diet. Now, I actually haven't talked about sugar because sugar is another big part of my diet. And it's because sugar is the perfect complement to starches, like I said, in the teriyaki sauce and barbecue sauce. I also have been known to sprinkle brown sugar on my toast with my country crock butter. Delicious, right? The thing with sugar is that it's a carbohydrate. It's a quick carb, but it's still a carbohydrate, which means it is supplementing my carbohydrate needs, my glucose needs, my fuel needs for my cells. And if I had zero sugar in my diet, then I would have to rely solely on carbohydrates coming from starches and vegetables, starchy vegetables like potatoes. And that would require every carbohydrate to be attached to fiber, when that just requires more stomach volume. But actually having some of my carbohydrates be coming from sugars, whether it's 200 calories a day or 300 calories, I don't track, but it actually helps me to meet my fuel needs without the extra bulk in my stomach. So I love having sugar additionally added to my diet. It's wonderful. I love having juice. I love having lemonade as one of my favorite juices. I love having sugar on my toast and in my sauces. And then I have gone through phases where I've had like gummies and Skittles and things that satisfy that sweet tooth if I'm at the movie theater or if I'm out and about, if I'm on a road trip and I get a little pack of Skittles. But I've learned over time how my body feels when I have sugar in the form of Skittles versus in the form of cane sugar. So I allow it in moderation, but I try to stick with just the better sources of sugar, being cane sugar, because cane sugar is just a plant sugar. And same with when it comes to like occasional sodas. Cane sugar sodas just taste better than high fructose corn syrup sodas, but Sprite and things like that, I have them in moderation and I don't worry too much about it. I just try to stay on my hydration. I allow sugar in my diet. And also too, when it comes to alcohol, I have had a lot of experience with alcohol. I've had a lot of experience with marijuana. And so just to touch on that, because I know that that might be a part of your life or it might be a concern for you. And I'll just share my experience. I have noticed that alcohol has been a part of my life and pot in the past years. And I really had to ask myself recently, why was I reaching for those two substances? And I was realizing that I was reaching for alcohol because I think I was like having a little bit of underlying depression, and I was reaching for pot because I was having a little bit of underlying indigestion. And the reason I was having depression and indigestion is because I was having, it was stomach related, stomach issues, and it was because I was not in the balance that I needed to be in with my portions and with my density of my foods. Because just for example, fruit all the way up to bread, they have different calorie densities because fruit is way more high in water and bread is way lower in water. So the same amount of calories of fruit and bread, for example, are gonna be two different volumes in the stomach. So our stomachs can only handle so much quantity every day. So if, for example, my body can consume 5 pounds of food in the day, I need to meet my fuel needs within those 5 pounds of food without underfueling and without overfueling. If I want to feel my best in my digestion, I want to meet my energy needs, and I want to be able to trim off the extra body fat and have the energy that I need day in and day out to stay moving and then to sleep well and all of the above. So we all have to just kind of acknowledge how much food we can eat and then whether we are meeting our fuel needs within the volume that we can eat. And so anyway, I just had to face that when I really looked at why am I reaching for pot? It was usually because my stomach felt uneasy or, just slow in digestion, so that I would smoke and it would eliminate that feeling of stress in my body. It would literally make it go numb so that I would feel better. And then the alcohol was potentially treating an underlying depression, and the depression was coming from the indigestion because they say the stomach is the second brain of the body. Well, if there was digestion issues, I was going for the alcohol to make myself feel better. When I started acknowledging that I needed to be looking at the balance in my portions and also in my densities, then the first thing I did was I reduced vegetables and I reduced fruit. I noticed that I reduced my indigestion and I reduced my depression that I didn't even realize I had. And all of a sudden, at the beginning of 2024, I went 100 days sober and I have drank very minimally since then. And as of this past summer of 2025, because right now it's December of 2025, I quit pot. So done with marijuana because I eliminated my digestion issues. What did I do to figure out the balance? I just had to look at all of my starches and options, and then fruit, because those are, and then sugar, the main carbohydrate sources that I eat to meet my fuel needs. And I just had to figure out, how can I balance out these carbohydrate sources in a way for me to thrive? And I had to balance them out meal to meal, but I also had to balance out my portions throughout the day. And what I noticed is that I just needed to start getting into a routine where I knew that a Nutri-Grain bar was going to make me feel good for my workout. And then post-workout, I knew that this amount of cereal was going to make me feel good. So stick with that same amount of cereal, or a big hunk of bread afterwards with some butter and jam on it. And that made me feel good. And I just had to start to memorize, well, that portion makes me feel good, so I'm going to stick with that. That portion makes me feel good, so I'm going to stick with that. And it's just a learning curve, consistent learning curve. It never stops. To this day, I still fluctuate, but I start to know the cues and the little signs that my body gives me that tells me you haven't eaten enough, or maybe you've eaten too much, or maybe your density was too low, maybe you had too much too many potatoes and squash, and you didn't have enough bread and grains. And so I started learning over the years, and weeks, months, it can happen quickly. Maybe a lot of you are moms and have had children, and you kind of have to start to get to know what your child's needs are, and you get them into routine, and you know what their needs are. But for some reason, when it translates to ourselves, we have trouble figuring out what our own needs are. And so we really need to just say, can this be easier than we're thinking it is? Can it be easy to know what my needs are and to stop eating more than what my needs are? And why am I in such denial about it? Like, am I eating really distracted? Am I not really understanding the purpose of food and why I'm eating and what I'm eating for? Am I meeting an emotional need, or am I meeting my physical needs? Am I finding a balance of meeting my physical and emotional needs? And am I eating enough sugar too? Because, I just want to say that adding sugar to my toast and having condiments with sugar, and then also having lemonade on hand at all times, I noticed that I rarely, basically never crave any dense sugars in the form of cookies, cakes, pies, ice cream, anything like that, because I'm getting 200-300 calories of sugar in my day every single day. So my sugar needs are met. And if I weren't meeting those sugar needs, I would potentially be craving the higher sugar and fat density foods at the end of the night, like the ice cream and the treats and stuff like that, and alcohol. Well, as soon as I met my sugar needs, alcohol consumption reduced. Because if we're craving alcohol, we could be just craving more sugar, more calories, more, and like I was saying before, if our calorie sources are all from whole grains and starches, our stomachs might get too full. So it's good to have the sugar. But I've really gone off on, my lifestyle and eating high carb diet. But if we're eating the high fat diet, then we can't be consuming sugar. And so I know that some of you out there might be thinking to yourself, I have to eat high fat and I'm never going to be able to eat sugar again. So I'm just going to stay away from the sugar and I'm thriving. And I support that. And I think that you should stick with that. If you're eating high fat and you really want to be eating carbohydrates, then you need to transition over to eating a carbohydrate diet. And that's going to take a huge process of transition. But it's just like learning a new language. You just have to do a little bit at a time, and you have to stay calm in your mind and body while you're transitioning, and not be too worried and stressed, because you might have a little bit of digestive distress and also blood sugar distress while you transition over, but that's because you're adapting to a whole new way of eating. And so you need to go through that easily and gently, and definitely bounce a lot, jump instead a lot through the transition to keep your blood sugar down and to keep your body moving. That can be a huge help if you want to transition over to a high carbohydrate diet, because then you can have bread and you can have potatoes and you can have sugar without any blood sugar issues. You got to pick one or the other, and you got to stick with it for life. So that's the end of my first ebook series podcast video. Thank you so much for sticking with me here till the end, and I hope you learned something. Comment below if you have any questions or any feedback for me, and also give the video a like if you learned something and you love this video, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Happy jumping too. I hope to see you in class. Visit ijumpinstead.com if you're interested in starting your jumping journey, so you can learn which rebounders we recommend, and then get your rebounder, and then you can jump into our free classes on iJumpInstead YouTube, okay? So I'll see you in class. Thanks again for being here. I'll see you in my next ebook series podcast. Take care. Lots of love. Bye-bye.